So welcome back, folks, to CMM Live. My name is Joe Campolo, your host, and we just came off a very interesting segment with Alan Sasarath, partner at Sasarath and Zarian, to talk about a lot of financial things that are going on. And now we're very happy to be joined with my good friend Gregg Schor. Gregg's the CEO of Protegrity Advisors, a wonderful mergers and acquisitions advisory firm located here on Long Island. I do serve as the chair of the Board of Advisors of Protegrity, so I know it fairly well. But there's been a lot of stuff going on, and we wanted to, to have a conversation with Gregg. You know, it's very interesting here on Long Island because folks, most folks, people who don't own a business, their largest asset is typically their home. And people are very comfortable and familiar with working with real estate brokers when they need to sell their home. But truly, a business can be a much larger asset than folks' homes. And people haven't really gotten comfortable yet on Long Island, or they're not inclined or intuitive to say I should be working with a broker to help me sell my business. So talk about Protegrity Advisors and why folks with businesses should be thinking along those lines.
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate the invitation and to appear on the show. I think we're actually changing that dynamic where people are getting more and more open, business owners, to using an advisor. I think the description broker carries with it sort of kind of times more of a negative implication in terms of they're used to a real estate broker where you may just kind of post something on a website and do very little in terms of marketing and research and actively soliciting clients. When you're selling a business, it's much more confidential. You can't have customers, employees, suppliers knowing that that you're even thinking about a sale. So I think that has a lot to do with the reluctance of a business owner to proactively seek out an advisor for a transaction. They may mention it to their accounting firm or their lawyer, or they may be receptive to an unsolicited inquiry. But in terms of proactively looking, they have that concern about confidentiality, and also it's a huge emotional leap for these companies. Typically, it's a business that was started, a long time ago, maybe even by a prior generation, and it's become a way of life. And while they, in their mind think about one day selling, to actually, kind of pull the trigger and make that decision to at least explore the possibility, it takes a lot.
So, M&A advisors here on Long Island are fairly new. I can remember over the last 20 plus years practicing, a lot of times accounting firms wanted to try and handle the negotiations, and lawyers would try and handle the negotiations. And it seems to me that, M&A advisors are the ones that are really equipped to maximize value in terms of the transactions. So talk about what Protegrity does throughout the whole process to help make sure that value is being maximized.
Yeah, so at Protegrity, we approach the sale of a business the same way that a top-tier investment bank would. We start out by really understanding the business, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we want to know, is now the right time to sell? Should they wait? Should they maybe make some acquisitions themselves to try and increase valuation and show that they could scale? So we really do a thorough analysis of the company itself. We do a kind of an informal valuation at the beginning, because we want to get a feel so that we can communicate to our clients or our prospective clients, here's what we think is a reasonable valuation range that you can expect. Because you don't want to go through a whole process, get offers, and then find out that the expectations of the client really weren't in line with what market realities are. We then research, we have extensive databases and networks. We research comparable transactions to try and see, how hot or cold is the market? What are buyers looking for? What are they valuing? Is it revenue? Is it earnings? Is it growth? And so we research, thousands and thousands of transactions to see where this company may lie. We create then the marketing materials for the company. So it's typically a confidential information memorandum, which will go through the history of the company. We create a story on here's where the company came from. Here's why it's such a great opportunity for someone, but more importantly than where it came from, here's where it could go. Here's the growth opportunities, because a buyer is coming in not they want to see you demonstrate, you know, a great trajectory in the past, but they're really buying the future, depending upon whether the type of buyer they may be holding on to it or they may be looking to sell it in a certain number of years. We do the reach out campaigns to the potential buyers confidentially. They won't find out who our client is until they sign a non-disclosure agreement. And then it's a staged release of information over time. Once they sign the non-disclosure, they get the memorandum. Then it's typically some in-person meetings, telephone calls. The next step after that is hopefully multiple letters of intent, so that our clients can make comparisons. You know, this purchase price may be higher, but this has a better, you know, maybe a client wants to stay on for X number of years, and with this particular purchaser, they could do that, whereas another one, they want to buy 100% and they can't stay. Maybe one is asking for more escrow, or the earnouts are unattainable. So we like to be able to have a myriad of offers for the client to review. The client will accept one. There'll typically be a no-shop period during the due diligence phase. Go through due diligence. We manage that process as well. We create the virtual data room. We coordinate with the lawyers and the accountants and wealth management providers, whoever else is involved, so that the client can focus on running their business. And then we help with the, you know, with the negotiations. Many times, you know, at the end of the day, every legal issue is really a business issue, so it gets handed over to the law firms, as you well know. And certain times they reach impasses because it really comes down to, you know, some type of business decision between the seller and the buyer. So we stay involved throughout the whole process, and we can even stay involved post-transaction for the transition. So we're there from before it starts until after it ends.
Yeah, I mean, you guys really, you know, as far as talent on Long Island, you guys have really assembled a powerhouse of talent that sits there for these Long Island businesses. You know, there's a myriad of business brokers out there. I still never understand exactly what they do, but really it is. So talk about the team. You guys have grown. You got beautiful new space. Talk about the team. Talk about, you know, all the talent that that Protegrity is able to bring to a transaction.
Yeah, so every deal has its own deal team. So it's typically made up of a research analyst. We have a director of financial modeling and valuations who's fantastic, who's, you know, probably the best with spreadsheets I've ever seen in my life. We sell to public companies. He'll sit on a conference call with 8 accountants from Ernst & Young. He'll explain to them in a nice way why their assumption is incorrect. He'll point them to a line in the spreadsheet, and his computer won't even be open. Then we have a lead advisor, someone who's been in the industry before. Typically for at least 20 years, who has experience in that sector, and then I round out the, you know, the deal team. So it's not just one person; it's a whole group, and then we have marketing, IT, admin, other support that we pull in as needed.
Yeah, it's great. And most of the advisors that you guys have there that I've worked with have all been former operators or sold businesses themselves. So it's not a bunch of eggheads sitting around trying to, it's guys who have rolled up their sleeves and done the deals.
Well, we think that's a major differentiator for us, because we have been on all sides of transactions, and I'll, you know, use myself as an example. You know, I've been Deputy General Counsel, Director European Operations, SVP Corporate Development, SVP Human Resources for companies that ended up getting acquired by Microsoft, by IBM, by EMC. I've also made acquisitions for companies, leading deal teams from that perspective. In addition, I don't typically admit this, but I started out as a lawyer, so I bring that perspective. So myself and the rest of the deal team, we've been on the buy side, we've been on the sell side, we've been lawyers on transactions, we've been accountants on transactions, so we've really seen it from all different perspectives.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, the most significant transactions that are happening here on Long Island, you guys are always at the forefront of it. Let's talk a little bit about the advanced diligence offering that you guys have. You know, and you know, I could have, Alan alluded to this on the prior segment here, and I could have lamented forever. Is, you know, you go into a new company, a family-owned company, and of course there's some hair on there. You know, but what I try to tell folks is, just like when you're selling your house, if you just paint the kitchen, redo the bathrooms, do a little bit of landscaping, the impressions are always different. So talk about advanced diligence and how important it is for business owners to have their house in order.
It's critically important, not only in terms of the valuation that you get, but also the time that the deal takes. You know, time is an enemy when you make the decision to sell. Anything can happen in the interim. It's also going to impact the escrow. The more confidence a buyer has in a company, the lower the escrow amount and the lesser the escrow period will be. So, you know, the way we approach it is, you know, you don't want to be cleaning house under the magnifying glass of a potential buyer. You want to do it when you're not under any pressure. It gives you latitude to clean things up more effectively. It reduces the risk that any employees or customers or vendors are going to find out that you're going through a transaction. And, you know, many times we'll go into a company because typically they're not running it for when they want to sell it. They're running it to do the best they can now. But many companies don't have employment agreements in place, especially with salespeople who are going to be key to the post-transaction world and the buyer. Intellectual property they may not have, have all tied up. Many times, the contracts with key customers expired 10 years ago, and they've just been doing business ever since. And that may work day to day, but in the context of a potential new buyer coming in, you need that contract in place. So there's many things that a company can do to get themselves ready and put themselves in a much better position when you're not under pressure.
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen business owners is overestimating their own worth and underestimating the worth of their salespeople and their key employees. And when it comes time to sell, buyers are going to be making sure that those salespeople are locked up, and it turns into a little bit of a mess. We talked, again, because I think a lot of people have experience with selling or buying a house, and not a lot of people have experience with selling or buying a business. So one of the things that is easily obtainable by somebody looking to sell their house or buy a house is how much do the houses cost in this neighborhood, because it's very readily public information. Buying and selling a business, because of confidentiality, because there is no reporting requirements with public companies, you can't really get that information. So what are the different ways that you guys use to help value a business and to help business owners understand how they should be looking at their business in terms of value?
Well, the majority of transactions, unless it's a hot tech company where it's usually a multiple of revenue, it's usually a multiple of the adjusted earnings. So you take the earnings and we normalize them. So if a business owner is pulling out $500,000 a year, and if that person would be replaced, you'd be paying the replacement $150,000 a year, then that difference, that extra $350,000 would go towards what we call the adjusted EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation. And that takes on very, very great significance, because if the deal valuation, if the multiple is 6x, meaning 6 times the adjusted earnings, now it's $350,000 times 6. So it adds another couple of $1 million to a transaction. So approaching the valuations and how we get the research is critical. So we have databases that we look at. The issue with the database, or the challenge that anyone who doesn't have the right experience will have to deal with is most of the transactions where you can get the details are significantly larger. They're in the hundreds of millions or billions. So you have to extrapolate from that. You also don't know, even when there are smaller transactions, did that include earnout? Was there escrow? Was there consulting agreements built in? So we're able to filter through all of that based upon our experience and come up with what would be comparable numbers. We also have extensive networks with private equity firms, with family offices, with accounting firms, where we can check in with them and see what they're valuing similar companies and specifically what transactions they've done. And because of those relationships, we get that information. They may not tell us exactly who the particular company was, but we can get that type of analytics, which is tremendously helpful.
Yeah, so the challenge always on Long Island is there's a lot of family-held businesses, and I always say that, maybe I should have been a psychiatrist instead of a lawyer, because family businesses are difficult. But what advice could you give owners of businesses now that are looking to sell, maybe in the future, but not today, in terms of how they can prepare themselves, not just legally and financially, but also emotionally? I mean, it's a very difficult process. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, they have to have some idea of what they would like to do post-transaction. If their business is their whole life, they're going to have a very difficult time letting go. So they really have to, are they at the point in their life where they're ready for a change? And a lot of times it's pushed by a certain level of aggravation that pushes them to say, I'm ready. Either I've reached a certain age, or I have grandchildren, or I'm tired of the traffic or the weather, and I need to do something different. And then they also, we have them think about, would they be interested in selling 100% of their business? They should be thinking about, do they only want to sell 51%? Because in our transactions, the buyer's going to want a majority. In many instances, they want the selling owner to have some skin in the game moving forward. It only makes sense for the seller to do that if there's going to be another exit down the road. If they're getting acquired by a strategic, keeping equity there may or may not ever be a second liquidity event. But if it's a private equity firm or a family office or a search fund, then there will be. So keeping some equity and having an active role, if that's something they would be interested in. Many times the owners say, I'd love to get out of the day-to-day. It would be great to keep the strategic relationships, look for acquisitions to make, do some travel for the company, do those things. So they have to kind of mentally prepare a couple of years ahead of time and start thinking about what is it that I would want to do when I make that decision to sell.
Yeah, it's challenging, especially in terms of the earnouts. So talk about earnouts. Talk about how the typical deals you're seeing are coming out now.
Right. Now, earnout is a great tool if properly applied, because what it'll do is bridge a gap. So, we discussed earlier, there's the historical financials, and then there's the projections moving forward. A buyer is really going to be interested if the projections moving forward are attractive and growth is being showed. But if you don't hit those growth projections, then a buyer is going to want to hold you accountable. So they're willing to pay on past performance at closing. They're less willing to pay on future performance, which is understandable. From the seller perspective, once I give up majority control, I lose a lot of the impact I may have over the business. So they may not run it the same way. They may not devote the resources necessary. So you really have to come up with a formula that strikes the right balance, that really rewards the owner for hitting those objectives and for future growth, and doesn't penalize them for things that are out of their control. So there's usually always an earnout perspective component of a transaction. We position it with our clients. We're going to fight as hard as we can, and they'll be involved in the process in terms of the earnout formula, but they have to be comfortable with the sale price. Let's assume you don't get any of it. We want them to be 100% comfortable that the price that we got them is still good enough, and the earnout is just bonus on top of it, and that's how we approach earnouts.
Yeah, cash at close is important for them to understand that cash at close might be all that happens, so they have to be comfortable with that. Without violating, obviously, any confidentiality or anything, talk about some of the types of transactions, the industries, some of the things that you guys are involved in, past closings, what's going on now. Give the audience a sense of the types of industries that are hot right now.
Yeah, we characterize ourselves as industry agnostic, and we're involved in deals in all types of industries, in manufacturing, in retail, in healthcare, technology, distribution. We just closed last week a healthcare transaction where we sold an 8-location medical practice to a private equity firm, which several years ago would have been unheard of. Many doctors are, selling. They're frustrated with the industry, and they're kind of, I don't want to say taking the easy way out, but they're selling to hospitals so that they could just become an employee, and now they don't have to worry about the back office. Our clients were very entrepreneurial. They saw a really attractive growth platform that they've built over the years, and we were actually able to identify a private equity firm that's characterized as social impact. So yes, they want to make a profit, but their investors also want them to have a positive impact on the community, and that was really nice for us to be able to be part of and make a transaction like that happen.
Yeah, so as far as manufacturing, one of the things that's here on Long Island, the manufacturing community, is changing and becoming much more diverse. So the same way, what I'm finding, and I'm interested to hear your comments on it, the same way I'm seeing, several years ago, a home healthcare, home infusion company was bought by a private equity firm that was looking to get into that space. Now, healthcare providers are being bought by private equity firms. Manufacturers are being bought by private equity firms. And here we have an interesting shift on Long Island where all these organic, family-owned, grown businesses, we now see private equity firms coming in, and acquiring it. Should these business owners be afraid of private equity? You hear all these horror stories, they get all nervous about it. Talk about that. What's been your experience working with these private equity groups?
There's all different types, and this is just a generalization, but it's not the Gordon Gekko type private equity firm that people may think of. The private equity firms actually want the businesses to grow. They want the owners and the employees to be happy because they want everyone's interest to be aligned, because in order for the private equity firm to make money, the company's going to have to sell at a higher valuation down the road than what they acquired it for. So if they were to buy a company and terminate employees and strip it down just to pull out profits, now what's it going to be worth 3, 5, 7 years from now? So the private equity firms that we do deals with, just extremely professional. Most of them have been business owners themselves, so they've also been on different sides of the table, and they get it. And it's actually been a very, very positive experience. And whereas private equity firms, originally they were just doing the billion-dollar deals, now there's private equity firms of all sizes with all different areas of specialization, and they may be looking themselves to sell it in a certain number of years to a larger private equity firm. So everyone's interests are really aligned, and especially when the seller gets to keep some equity in the business moving forward. Typically, the owner will get a board seat, some type of employment or consulting agreement, and the majority of the private equity firms want to keep the owner for, at minimum, some period of transition time. They want to see a strong management team. They're not there to gut a company.
Yeah, and that's really important that people understand, the experience that you guys have, both in dealing with private equity firms, and family-owned businesses, because I think that's the wave here on Long Island. I think private equity firms are going to be acquiring a lot of these businesses, and they've been so afraid to deal with them. And, the important issue is durability. So Alan touched on this, and I think it's incredibly important. Unlike selling a house where you close and you're never going to talk to the person again that you bought it from, they're going to be on their own. Most owners are going to be asked to be staying on for a little while. There's going to be an earn-out component. So there has to be this durability of the relationship. There has to be a cohesiveness. And that can't be relegated to attorneys and accountants, because we're terrible at making sure that there's durability. So talk about that challenge, right? So here you have, this daunting task of trying to make sure that these two parties, both of whom want a best deal from each other, are going to be able to get a deal that's win-win for both of them and can move forward. An incredibly important service that I think you guys do. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I view us as kind of the quarterback for making sure the client is the owner of the team or the head coach, and the other service providers are the other coaches. But we're the quarterback, coordinating between everything and making it happen. And sometimes there's a dose of tough love with the client if they have unrealistic expectations in terms of what their compensation should be moving forward, what the valuation should be. So, when we're talking with the private equity firm, we're, 100% advocating for the client, even if we feel that maybe they're asking for things that, are really not practical or not market. We'll still do our best to achieve it. But we also have to, give kind of that dose of tough love to the business owner, and there's typically, there's going to be, one or more crises, during a transaction where everybody says, you know what, maybe I don't want to do this, but we actually know that they do, or we wouldn't have gotten to that point. And there's just highs and lows, and we try and coach them ahead of time to expect that they are going to, we are going to hit bumps in the road, but here's the reasons why. This transaction makes sense for you, for your family. Same thing with the private equity firm. And just, really sometimes being a diplomat, couching things, rephrasing things, maybe, not communicating a message directly from the private equity firm to the owner, but being, honest and accurate, but putting a context on it that won't be, inflammatory or, perceived because it's their business. That you don't want them taking it personally and then overreacting, which wouldn't be in their best interest.
Yeah, and you guys are the best in the business at keeping those situations calm.
Thank you, Joe.
I mean, you really are, because people who haven't gone through the process don't understand that you're in the middle of a deal, you have a business owner that's getting millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions of dollars for your business, and they want to blow a deal up because they're not getting, an extra week's vacation or something like that. At that point, you just want to jump off the building, but you really got to keep that situation calm and moving forward. And you guys really
That's
are.
exactly the scenario we had on this last transaction,
Yeah, it's
as
just
you know.
a very tough situation. And folks that don't do it don't understand the issues that, the issues that come up. We have about a minute left. International work, right? So a lot of international companies are looking to expand here in the U.S. How, you have a lot of experience internationally. How do you see that playing out for, both for, the United States, New York, and Protegrity in terms of making themselves attractive to international buyers?
Yeah, I mean, we get contacted all the time by international strategics and private equity firms who are looking to have a platform company in the U.S., whereas other, U.S.-based, they may already have a platform. International ones typically don't, and those are the ones that that we're in touch with. They see especially Long Island, New York area as really a great place for them to gain a foothold into the United States. And based on my, kind of prior roles, have very extensive international relationships, especially with European private equity, family office, venture capital. So I see that being a really strong growth area in the future, having these international companies acquire Long Island based and keeping them here. That's a big thing for us. We don't want to see the clients get acquired and then operations get moved somewhere outside of the Long Island area. We really want to see it stay and grow and then make more hires locally.
Right, that's great. So folks, we have to take a wrap here. We were joined today with Gregg Schor, President and CEO of Protegrity Advisors. Really, really huge talent here. If you're thinking of selling your business, there's nobody better than Protegrity Advisors to turn to. Gregg, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joe.